Karen Shell, all the way from Arizona.
Yes. Hi, Jerry.
The Sunshine State. Is that the Sunshine State?
It
the
is
Valley of the Sun.
Valley of the
Phoenix.
Sun.
Yes.
Well, actually, this Grand Canyon State.
Okay, the Grand Canyon
Yeah.
State. But the
But
Valley
there's
of
a
the
lot
Sun.
of sunshine.
I lived there for a while, Scottsdale actually. And I remember there was 100 days straight where there was sunshine and no clouds. And for the people who live in somewhere like the Willamette Valley of Oregon or Seattle where there's a lot of rain, they were like, hey, I want the sunshine. Too much sunshine can be depressing too. And I never realized that.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I wish there would just be a storm roll in, a light thunderstorm or some rain. And it was...
If you combine the heat with the sunshine, then it can become a real problem. You can lose your sanity.
Yeah, especially in the summertime. So it can be a little, but it is dry.
It is a dry heat,
And
so they say.
here was a weird thing that happened. So it was 118. This was in 1988, I think, 1988. It was 118. It was like a record-breaking day. I got in the pool. I was living in like an apartment up on a place called Tatum Place, up on Bell Road and
I know
Tatum.
just where that is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I was there. Get in the pool, get out. It was evening, but the sun was still barely up. Wind hits me, you get cold. It's evaporation. It's like refrigeration works.
Yeah.
It's evaporation. And it's really weird. It's like out in Arizona, you wash your hair. Back then, you wash your hair and you got to fly to work because you don't have time. You head your head out the window to dry your hair out the window. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. But you'd get cold, even at 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And you don't get cold in the Southeast if it's 90 degrees, no matter what. It's hot everywhere. It's humid everywhere. How do you like the humidity? Although we're having beautiful weather right now.
Yeah, the weather's beautiful right now. But anytime that I go somewhere humid, I soak it up like a sponge.
Now, a lot of people who live, and you were born
Not born,
in Phoenix? No, okay.
but raised. So
Okay, where were you born?
I was actually born in Chelsea, Massachusetts,
Okay.
right outside of Boston.
Oh, you're one of them waspy people then.
Well, no, I left when I was a
Northeast.
baby.
What?
People will say, I thought I heard an accent. And I no, you didn't, because I was not speaking when I lived there.
Okay.
So Phoenix is all I know.
How old were you when you moved there?
Well, I was a baby when we left. There.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't remember Massachusetts.
I don't remember anything. No.
So it's, you like pizza, right?
Yeah. Who doesn't love pizza?
Okay, well, it's South Haven. Is it South Haven? Is it South Haven, Heather? New Haven, I'm sorry. South Haven's in Michigan. We used to run the film festival there. It's New Haven. New Haven has the 3 best pizza restaurants in the world.
Really?
Pepe's, Moderns, and Sally's. And it's not pizza, it's a Beats. And if you look at the sign, it's a pizza. And they pronounce it a Beats.
Oh, huh.
And these now it is Italians that created these, and they got these old coal ovens that they built in the 1920s, and it was they made the food, they made pizza for people who worked in these factories that were there. I think shipyards or wood, something to do with wood furniture, maybe. I don't know what it was, but a couple thousand people working in these factories. And that's also where Yale is located, University of Yale University. We got a documentary at the film festival one time called Pizza, a Love Story. And of course, my background being a chef, right?
Yeah.
And mastering and baking and pastry. Pizza is the ultimate almost to me. In fact, we're going to have some, it's pizza dough, but it's a French tart. We're going to have that after the show.
Excellent.
With goat cheese and certified San Marzano tomatoes. So it's a real delicacy. It's a real treat, but it's very simple, but yet complex. The love for pizza, I've got to go up there and do the pizza tour. And I got to try all 3, right? And everybody has their favorites, but they always rank the best in the world. So you always assume pizza, you think of New York City. It's actually New Haven.
Wow.
Connecticut, close to Massachusetts. So if you ever get up in that neck of the woods next time,
all right,
make sure you do a pizza tour in New Haven. And pizza's regional too. So do you have good pizza shops?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Scottsdale?
Phoenix. I live in a part of town called Arcadia.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the restaurant capital. So a lot of great restaurants in Phoenix, including pizza.
You have a lot of different cultures in Phoenix to bring their, and I always say food is cultural currency. And a lot of times when people move to the United States, their first endeavor, if they're not brought here for a reason, for industry or something specific, or they're not a doctor or a lawyer, whatever, a lot of times the family will open up a restaurant and they bring the food from their culture, and it's the first out. So it's not been bastardized or it hasn't been filtered through the American filter yet. It's authentic of where they come from. And you go in and you watch the family unit working, and it's made the way they made it where they come from just a year or two prior. And to me, that's so exciting, and getting to taste that.
Absolutely.
And Scottsdale has some great Italian restaurants. And I don't know if you know the reason behind that, of all the mobsters. A lot of mobsters moved there, and a lot of people who owned factories in New York and Chicago moved there in the 1950s and 60s to retire. Now, the mobsters came to sometimes hide out in retirement, because I always called Scottsdale the quiet Beverly Hills. It's exclusive, it's wealthy, and it's quiet. It's not in your face.
Yeah.
It's just quietly sitting there. And some of the best pizza I've had has been in Scottsdale. And the old half booths. That was when I lived there in the late 80s. They still had Pizza Pharaoh's is what the name of that pizza shop was. Pizza Pharaoh's. That popped up in my head. And then I think we talked on the phone about Bialys.
Yep.
The little dough looks kind of like a bagel, but the center is not cut out, and you dip that in a special dressing or sauce. So you like food? No?
I love food, but maybe not quite as much as you.
Okay. So you moved to Arizona when you were a baby, and it's where you've been your whole life as far as where you've lived. Tell people about the summers there. Tell people about the winters there, what it's like.
Well, the winters are pure heaven. Spring, fall, and winter are pure heaven. Winters can get a little cold, but still, I mean, you can be outside. It's truly, I think, some of the best weather there is. Summers are miserable, but you know, everything's air conditioned. You go from air conditioned car to an air conditioned house, and so you don't spend time outside. You know, if I'm outside, then it's before sunrise or right around sunrise. So I love to ride my bike on the canal. There's a canal that runs right through the city, and you don't even realize you're in the city. So, and there's a lot of mountains to see. So in the summer, you're outside early, or you're not outside at all.
There was a place, it's just popping in my head, called the Salt River, if I remember right, where people used to inner tube. Do they still do
There's
that?
Salt River, and there's a lot of lakes. Right around Phoenix, there's Lake Pleasant, Saguaro Lake, Bartlett Lake, Canyon Lake. There's a lot of lakes.
And you have the London Bridge in Arizona, too, in Lake Havasu.
In Havasu, yeah.
The lady that owned the company that I worked for when I was there, called Arizona Domine, she ended up being the mayor of Lake Havasu.
Really? Huh.
Yes. Yeah, and it was always a question. I think it's been a question on some of the game shows. Where's the London Bridge located? Well, London. No, it's not. It's in Lake Havasu. They moved it stone by stone. So do you like living there?
I love living there.
Yeah.
But, I travel a lot as well, so I don't get overly bored.
So tell me about your growing up, and you're a well-known commercial photographer.
Yeah.
Tell me about growing up. How did you get into commercial photography? So start with a young age.
Okay.
Was it there when you were little?
No.
No. Okay.
No. People think I grew up with a camera in my hands. That's not the case. So I was always creating. I was an artist. So I was always in my own little world and creating something with my hands, building something. So I knew I was creative. So in high school, I took a vocational course, commercial art. So I thought, well, how will I earn a living as a creative? Commercial art. So that was my initial plan. I'd never even held a camera at that point. So then I went to ASU and planned to get my degree in commercial art. So you have to get 2 years of requirements before you can apply to get into the program. And all in the Fine Arts College. So I applied to get in the program, didn't get in, because at that point I found out that they had this huge waiting list. At the time, ASU was over-enrolled and understaffed. So I realized it was going to take me 5-6 years to get through school, and I was on a 4-year scholarship, an academic scholarship. I'm one of those people, I love using both sides of my brain. So they're on my academic scholarship, getting my fine art degree. And I wanted to get out in 4 years. So I switched my major at that point, never planning on being a photographer. I had the first photo class of my life just a semester before making that decision. In fact, the first few rolls of film I ran through the camera didn't even come out. So, but it had to be something where I wasn't going to lose the 2 years of credits. But I still planned to continue my, design, commercial art education. And I would petition the dean, please let me take a graphic technology class instead of another drawing or painting. They'd say no, I'd take it anyway. I worked full time at the second half of college. And one of the jobs was, I had 2 jobs. One was at a magazine. I was doing the layout and paste up. This is one that was typesetting. You just send it off to the typesetter to get it back and glue it onto the board. And so that was still my plan. So I graduated and started my business right away. Didn't even occur to me to go get a job. To think I've just been a born entrepreneur. And so my first business name was Shell Photo Graphics, capital G. So that way it left me open to do either, graphic design or photography. But what a blessing in disguise it was, because I quickly learned I'm so much better suited as a photographer. If I was a designer, this is right as everything went computerized, I'd have been staring at a computer screen all day, every day. So I'm so grateful that I sort of stumbled into photography, because it has been absolutely perfect for me. Get to use both sides of my brain, be creative and technical. Get to be outside. I love to be outside. I like to be physically active, love to learn. So constantly talking to people and learning things and going places and experiencing things and learning things I would never have been exposed to otherwise. So I have had the most amazing career, over 30 years now. And I literally couldn't have found anything. I was born to be a photographer. Absolutely.
And you went into commercial photography.
I did.
And we were talking last night. That was a job as early back as 30, 40 years ago that was dominated by males.
Especially
much. In the Valley of the Sun.
Yeah.
It was dominated by males. And you said that you'd had some resistance getting into that. You want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
what we were talking about last night as far as what happened and how you...
Well, so I have, I'll share in that, and I have a theory that I haven't shared with you yet, and that is that females can't even get assisting work. I mean, I learned everything that I know assisting. I didn't learn anything in school. I learned more in 4 months assisting than 4 years of college.
Now, do you think that you ever think people meet contacts inside the arts inside of college, or that not in Arizona?
No.
I always tell people there's only 2 film schools, USC, UCLA, because of the contacts you make.
No, in fact, I think out of my entire graduating class, 2 of us actually became photographers.
Okay.
So no, not so much.
Okay.
So, but even as an assistant, I could not get assisting work. I heard to my face over and over and over again, we don't hire women. We don't hire women. We don't hire women. There was one photographer that was probably one of the biggest photographers in town, with the type that would go to Spain for a month to do the BMW calendar, that kind of stuff. And he is another one that said, I don't hire women, but you can work on the pre-production with my wife. And so I did. So we'd go on shoots, and I would be doing all day long, doing my job, the production end of it. And then at dusk, then the photo crew would go to work. And then I would jump on the photo crew and work for free. It took me 2 years of basically working for free on the photo crew before he'd hire me as an assistant. I think I was the first and only ever female assistant even ever on his crew. But over and over again, I would hear, we don't hire women. There was one photographer that by the end, I was getting out of the assisting work and doing more shooting, and he still said, I don't hire women. And I said, I understand that, but I have worked with all of these photographers, some very well-known national photographers. Please call any of them for a reference. And he still wouldn't. So, but one of the advantages is that when I did start getting assisting work, I had to work a lot harder because I was so busy trying to prove myself. I'd move giant cases that a guy wouldn't move by himself just to prove myself. And I learned a lot. So it really ended up becoming an advantage. And my theory is that there are not a lot of female commercial photographers because they can't get the assisting work. And that's where you learn everything. You're not going to learn it in school. And so how do you compete? I mean, you have to be very technically savvy. You can't compete with the other guys if you don't know what you're doing. And there were some females that I had assisted. They're getting in the smaller jobs and things, and they wouldn't know what to do. Well, Karen, like back in the day before digital was a lot harder, you have to get a person with a computer screen. She said, well, how do I get the computer screen on the person? I'm like, well, you make the room go dark. You flash a strobe to get the person, and then have them stay really still, and then you keep the shutter open for 30 seconds to burn in the computer screen. Just basic stuff. But she didn't know, and how could she? Because she never assisted. So I think that's why there's very few.
Still to this day, or no?
There are. I think probably depends on the town. There are some now, surprisingly not many. But for decades and decades, there were, I was one of very, very few.
Do you think that digital, when the invention of great digital cameras came through, I think the 5D Mark II was one of the big, went over the top as far as the sensor goes. And it brought I guess where I'm going with this, the digital cameras make everybody photographers, but not really photographers. I always say if you have to crop in Photoshop, you're not a photographer. You should gather that shot with the eye just as you did with film. But do you think that everybody became a photographer and it made it tighter in the business?
Oh my gosh.
And now today with an iPhone 15, I mean, great photographs out of your phone.
It has completely changed the industry for sure. It's a lot easier. I mean, I'm seriously a dinosaur. I have all this knowledge that is completely worthless. I have, a bag this long with hundreds. I used to have hundreds of filters just to color balance, the environments. Digital comes out, it's instantaneous.
Right.
They stop carrying that bag. It requires 1/6 of the amount of lighting because it's so much more sensitive. I mean, it's a different world now. It's so much easier.
Do you think it made it harder to it made more photographers because you can take a wide angle shot and crop
for
it?
Sure.
And did it destroy some of the art is what I guess where I'm going with that. Did it destroy some of the art and everybody became a photographer although they're not? Because
yes.
you take it into Photoshop, doll it up, and who knew?
Oh yeah.
A professional can tell. But
yeah, well, there's a lot more room for error and a lot more room to correct. When you're shooting commercially, you're shooting slide film, not negative, and there's no, you've got a third of a stop, so you'd have to do the snip test and send it in, and you'd have to nail the exposure. With digital, you can be so far off and still salvage it. It's just a completely different world. So it's a lot easier.
Do you like it better? Because there are people who've moved from film to digital. You'll find they either say, I hate digital or I love digital. I'll never go back to film, or I'd wish film still remained. Because there's a different look with film, no matter what. It's just like when shooting a movie. There's a different look with film. You can emulate it.
I love it and I hate it.
Okay.
I love the freedom
of digital
because you can change midstream. Like before, you'd have to switch roll of film if you wanted to, go from low light to, more light, change ISO and all that. It just gives you so much more freedom. But on the other hand, you become your own lab. And so the part I hate about it is if I used to finish the shoot, close the camera case, I was done. The photo lab would have two pickup and deliveries, to my studio a day. I'd get the film back, deliver it to the client, done. Now it's for every day, depending on the type of shooting it is, but for a lot of the shooting I do, for every day of shooting, there's at least a day, if not 2 days, at the computer. And that's not work that I ever had to do before. So I basically had to become my own photo lab. Mm-hmm. And so I hate that part of it.
Do you still shoot medium format? I suppose you shot medium format with film a lot.
I shot. I had never even touched my 35 millimeter. I shot all large and medium format.
And do you still shoot medium format for commercial work?
No, so that's I definitely use a lot more 35 millimeter. So that that definitely has changed as well. There was a camera called the Fuji GX680. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I have not.
So
I know what Fuji cameras are.
It
but
combines medium and large format.
Okay.
So it has all the benefits of a 4x5. So it has a bellows, so you can move the lens and the film plane separately. And there's various reasons to that you would want to do that. But it has all the benefits of a medium format, of a viewfinder, and a roll film. So you're taking the best of both formats and putting it together. And that was the Fuji GX680. I had a 4x5 and I had my Hasselblad system. And then I got the Fuji. It was $25,000 system. And I got to use it maybe a year, the most 2. And then everything went digital. And I just sat there.
Do you still have it?
I hesitated to sell it. And had it, sitting in the case doing nothing for probably a decade, because I would see so many on sale for pennies on the dollar. I eventually did sell it, but it was painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wish you had it back?
Just
to sit there and look at.
Yeah.
It was a piece of art.
It kind of was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're growing up and you're in college. Did you work a job while you were going through college?
I did. I worked, multiple jobs.
Multiple jobs.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning last night, I don't know how much you want to get into it, but you had a tough childhood.
I did.
And we're jumping forward pretty far here. I was going to say, is that what helped to make you so driven at what you did to be successful? But when you're coming up and you're going to college, you'd mentioned that I think you told me last night you worked 3 jobs.
Well, and while I was in college, I worked during college. I worked 2 jobs and school full time, and had to keep my grades up to keep my scholarship. Right. So barely slept during college, and then I graduate, and I continue this pattern of not sleeping. Had to work 3 jobs to build my business. Also, my stepfather had gone to jail for a couple of years, and I was helping my mom out, and so continued this pattern of overworking and not sleeping.
And you're supporting your mom, going to college full time, and 2 jobs. What kind of jobs did you do?
Well, during college, it was anything that would work around school hours, so a lot of restaurants, and then the magazine. So by the time I was a junior, I didn't go to school 5 days a week. I could do like Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. So I was able to have a day job. So I had worked at the magazine that I mentioned, and then also a night job, waiting tables and things like that. And then I graduate, and I immediately start my business. So I was assisting during the days, also trying to build my own clients, and then working nights and weekends, constantly changing my clothes while driving from one job to the next. It was a lot of work, but I was very driven because I had a very challenging childhood involving abuse, and I was in survival mode, and that's what I knew.
So you're in survival mode. I suppose you've been in survival mode since you were a child with what we were discussing.
Yeah.
And that follows you through life for a certain amount. Well, still is, right? That's what, you never really get rid of. If it's severe trauma, you never really get rid of it. You learn to maybe deal with it. Yeah. But you can never get rid. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I don't think you can ever really get rid of it. You just learn to deal with it. And it's like when they always say about if you lose someone that's very close to you, you get over it. No, you learn to deal with it. And you accept it. And
here's how so I'm going to, I can get to what we were talking about, but I believe that when you go through stuff like that, it's going to change you, but you get to choose how. And so my term is bitter or better. Those are your two choices. There's not a whole lot else. And so if you choose the bitter route, well, then you're not going to be happy, and you're going to be blaming, and you're going to be sort of stuck in that victim mode. Or you can decide to use it to make yourself better, to really work on yourself and become a grateful person and somebody with purpose. And so for me, it's given me a lot of purpose throughout my lifetime. So I really sought out giving back and finding that purpose at a very young age. And I learned so many really important things early, that happiness is a choice. And I knew people that had everything. They had parents who cared, and they had all the money in the world, but they're miserable. So I learned at a really young age, and I'm so grateful that I did. And some people never learn it, or they might, take them decades to learn it. But I learned really young that happiness is a choice. Every single day you wake up and you choose to be happy. And I'm so grateful. So I think if you are willing to do the work, it can be such a gift. It truly can make you a better person. And so I have been able to live my adult life very inspired, purpose-driven, joyful, grateful, empathic, passionate, at a much deeper level than a lot of people that I know. And it's not despite of what I went through. In a lot of ways, it's because of what I went through. So I decided at a very young age I wanted to give back. And so for me, I realized I call it my recipe. So my recipe for staying happy has always been giving back, because that keeps your priorities in order. And it's so easy to slip out of that and get focused on yourself and what I call your bubble, and all your own problems seem so magnified. It's not possible to be a grateful, happy person when you're stuck in that bubble. Giving back always would pull myself out of that bubble and put my priorities right back in order. So giving back was huge. Adventure and play, so important for my recipe. Always, exploring and having fun and having something to look forward to, and reminding myself that there's this incredibly fascinating world out there. And then having a career that was very fulfilling, something I really loved doing. So if I had those things, I had my career, giving back, and my adventure and play, I always was always able to stay in that joyful state.
Giving back has been a big part of your journey of life, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you a question about when you were coming up. Do you think you would be the same person you are today if you hadn't went through the struggles you went through early on?
Absolutely not.
And so it's actually you've taken something that's a negative and turned it into a positive, and that's through struggle. Mm-hmm. And do you think you'd have been the person you are today? You think you'd have been close to the person you are today had you been born on the unicorn farm where everything's great? And would you have still been the same person, maybe just a few degrees off, or was it 180 degrees?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I think that I think it's a significant difference. I mean, I might have had the same qualities, but I think I have experienced them at a whole another level because of what I went through. And I have sisters that experienced the same things I did, and they haven't been as driven as me to give back. I think I was just born with that. I've been so driven to want to make a difference. I'm not really sure where that came from. Even in college, there was I did a semester photo project on the homeless. I'm still living through hell at home, but so I don't really know where it came from.
Now, when you did that project, was that in Tent City?
Yeah.
Okay. when I worked out there, I was a general manager of Arizona Dough Mine. One of their things that they did was TJ cinnamon rolls, and I used to save the cinnamon rolls from several different locations and take them down to Tent City. And the first time I went down there, I had to go through all this bureaucratic BS red tape to hand out several garbage bags full of cinnamon rolls that we'd stick in the freezer and save to take down there. Second time I went down there, I was like, I ain't going through that. I'm going to take them directly to the people. And I went out and I said, cinnamon rolls for everyone. And I'd set them, and then people would realize I'd come back like once a month, and I'd just take garbage bags and set them around and let people pick their own up instead of going through the bureaucratic red tape.
Right.
But that was amazing back then. That was in the 80s, late 80s. It was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge. And there were some sad stories down there.
Well, you know,
some people get there because of their choices.
Exactly.
But you run across people who didn't. It was just some bad luck. Something happened. Medical illness.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people don't realize that in this country, the number one reason for bankruptcy is medical bills. Number one. That's awful. Yeah. That's awful when we live in what well, not anymore, but the richest nation in the world. We used to be, but we can't provide our people with basic health care. I mean, that's my version of that you have to take care of your own. Yeah. You know, we got hundreds of billions to send around the world, but you can't that's what I always thought. It's like, just give them basic health care, right? Have something we can give back to the people.
Yeah.
I think we're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't. But yet when you look at our structure, a lot of people do get it. It's just through different programs, but there's this little niche that don't. And it's usually what you call the working poor. They're the ones without it. They're the ones that struggle. And the worry that comes along with that. But I did meet someone down there 2 times, and on the second time they had a family and it was medical bankruptcy. And I found someone up in Scottsdale, which is where my main office was, well off. And the man was saying he just wanted to work and get his family back. I put the two together, and they ended up, he ended up working, he started with landscape and painting the house, and all, and the guy had a guest house in a big house up in Scottsdale. The family stayed there. Eventually, the guy, he got his own painting company, and he started hiring a person, and he ended up being successful because it was just putting the right people together, and having the desire and the drive, what you were talking about. And sometimes I think that desire and drive, I think sometimes that's in you genetically too. You got that warrior gene, you know, that it dropped in you and maybe not in your sisters or something. And so, but circumstance can also play a big part in your success, and it's exactly what you said, how you handle it.
Yeah.
You know, when we were building the house as kids, my brother and I'd live in a tent for 6 months. My mom and dad lived in a little trailer. Well, we built up out of the ground. He'd go buy acreage, and that's how we did it. Every 4 years, he'd sell, and we'd go do it again. But if all we had was hot dogs, my mom was always like, "Man, hot dogs are the things to have. It's the coolest meal you can have." When we were kids, it's like, and she made it good. She could have bitched and complained and made it bad because, by and large, most females would have done that in that circumstance. Out there building the house, she was petite, she was a beautiful woman, and she could have had a better life maybe in today's terms by doing something else, but made it good.
Right. And
her and my dad got along good. And it made for I'm so fortunate we was talking in depth last night, I'm so fortunate when I go home and think, man, I grew up what you'd consider hard as far as rules and regulations, and you better do your work, and you got a lot of work to do and this and that, but never even something close to abuse or whatever. I mean, some of the people, the snowflakes today would say we were abused, but because you just worked all the time, but never that physical. I mean, my dad would slap you upside the head if you did wrong, but it was deserve it. It was deserve it. It straightened me out, but I'm so thankful today. And I feel so bad for children who have been abused in ways that they shouldn't, that we don't talk about. It's bad because it's the destruction that it leads. But you've taken something that was destructive and turned it into such a positive with your beautiful, and you were saying, well, it's commercial art. It's not art. Or as you said, it's commercial photography. It's not art. I said, no, it is. It is. The work that you do is fascinating.
Thank you.
And it's beautiful. So don't ever think that it's not art and inspiring to some people, because I like industrial photos. And I'm in the art business. So,
thank you.
But so as you go through life, and you're starting on your journey as adulthood, you have to help take care of your mother, and you're working 2 jobs, going to school. So you're working around the clock, and you're starting to, even though you're young and in shape, you're starting to put a lot of stress on your body and your mind. Is that correct? And do you think that you're covering this up by continuing to work and work and work, or not? Maybe covering up is not the right word.
I had convinced myself that I was a machine and I wasn't human, and that everyone else needed sleep. I didn't need sleep. So, you can take this drive, to, want to move beyond your circumstances, and it can be taken to an extreme, and I certainly did so. And that, so there's pros and cons when you go through, some of the stuff that I've been through. It started to really show when, in my 20s, I was so sleep deprived that I started falling asleep at the wheel almost every day. I mean, it's truly a miracle that I didn't kill myself or someone else. I must have had a purpose on this planet. Literally every day, broad daylight, I'd be hitting medians, on top of medians. I mean, it wasn't good. And then I'm making up excuses to everyone around me why I'm, having all these accidents. And because I didn't want to admit to even myself that, well, maybe I need sleep. So
you're a machine.
Yeah, I'm a machine. Right? So I've been pushing myself to a ridiculous extreme. It was just part of this whole survival mechanism. I did end up, because then it started affecting my heart. And so long story short, I said, okay, I need to start sleeping. So I was 29 when I realized, okay, I need to start sleeping more. And for the most part, had a very well-balanced life. Lots of, like I said, lots of play and adventure and travel and work. And I worked really hard, but still kept that balance. Always giving back. And especially when I didn't have the time, it always was so great about bringing things, my priorities back in order. So I had this wonderful recipe, but then I took my giving back to a new extreme, a new level, when I founded a nonprofit. So it was 12, 13 years ago now that there was a group of kids, there's a school for homeless kids, believe it or not. 100% of their students, of the students are living at or below poverty line. The majority are homeless. And what that really translates to is a lot of neglect, a lot of abuse that unfortunately often goes hand in hand with that. So I had been doing a lot of things for this school, and, for the school as a whole, whether it was reading programs, shoe drives, and then also got really close with this particular grade. I had adopted them for Christmas one year, and then got so close with the kids, and I not only did Christmas for them for five consecutive years, but sort of became just a mentor. I was down in class all the time, helping them, learn how to read, because they're always on varying levels of reading because their lives are
in turmoil. Yeah.
So just down there all the time. In fact, I remember one of the teachers like, so are you independently wealthy? Are you wealthy? So I'm like, no, quite the opposite. And he said, well, how is it that you spend all this time down here with the kids? Like, because I love the kids. So that's how much time I was spending down at the school. So there was this group of kids that I had sort of followed for 5 years and knew them well. I thought, I'm going to try this program. And that's what I do. And that's what I did a lot of at the school. Was I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I have a vision, I come up with an idea, and then I make it happen. So not unusual for me to do that. But this one was different. So this time I'm like, I'm going to teach the kids photography, and I'm going to get some photographers that I know, and we'll put on an exhibit of their work, give them a little self-confidence boost. Really had no idea what was going to come of it. So here's this group of kids that I knew well. I'd already known them well for 5 years at this point. And
how old are they at this point?
At this point, they're in the 7th grade.
Okay. So about 12, 13-ish. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I finished the program, and I can describe that in a little bit, but I couldn't believe the impact I saw in these kids. I truly did not expect it. And I thought, wow, after 20 years, I have finally found the way to really make a difference in these kids' lives. So the prior 20 years, there were other projects that I had created, and I wasn't a 501c3, but people knew me. They knew the work that I had done, and they trusted me. So I was able to pull it all off without being, a legal nonprofit. But I knew this program was that special. These kids went from, dark and withdrawn to bright and engaged, apathetic to connected and vibrant, shy to, confident, just amazing transformation. So I decided to turn this program into its own 501c3. And for the first few years, I was able to pull it off, with my business and the nonprofit. And then is my nature, I keep growing it, right? So by the third year, and it's literally all me. There's mentors, and they were all volunteer, but pulling it all together was seriously a job for 5 people, and I'm doing it by myself on top of running my business, which, photography, it is all consuming and very demanding. It's, there's no part-time.
At the professional level, it's extremely, it's like anything. At a professional level, there's a lot of detail in almost everything. Yeah. And it's not getting out, taking a picture with your cell phone and, I'm done for the day.
Yeah, you can't decide, I'm going to spend 4 hours, each day this week. No, it is, long hours, long days. So
I want to ask you a question before you go any further. You were talking about how it transformed the children. Mm-hmm. And if you could, maybe at this point, maybe discuss what the program was. Okay. I mean, did you hand kids cameras and say, hey, go take pictures of what you want? Did you train them? Did you do any type of training of how to use the camera, the rule of thirds, those type of things? Or did you just give them a camera and let them go and see what they get? And then the second part after that is in dealing with depression, withdrawnness, how important is art? Exposing people that usually don't have exposure to art, which is the underprivileged. Mm-hmm. They usually don't have exposure to art programs and hanging out at the museums. How important that is that to these people in these positions to help transform them into a better life. Okay. So those are the two. Okay. Start with the program, how, okay. And then so people get an idea of what the program is, right. What you did, in just like a couple paragraph type.
So I didn't even realize the benefit photography had on my healing until I saw it in the kids. So when children go through trauma, they disconnect. Is a means of survival. They disconnect from the situation, from the people around them, from their environments, and ultimately from themselves. And what I discovered is that photography is an incredibly effective and powerful way to get these kids to reconnect. There were some kids that for 3 weeks, they would refuse to push the shutter. That is how painful their world is. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to connect with that painful world or the people around them. So what I discovered is, one, the camera itself is a really powerful tool because it's like a safety net. Without it, these kids will not look around. But somehow you give them that, and it literally is a safety net. So it's the combination of the camera itself, also mentor. So the mentor is a really important piece. So very pretty one-on-one. So for every 2 kids, it's 1 mentor. So the kids are building a relationship with adult mentors who happen to be photographers, whether amateur or professional, but they're trained to see and to notice. But they're also learning to trust and learning good communication. And so the mentor piece was really, really important. Then field trips was was a huge piece. Removing the kids from their daily stressful lives.
And this would be during school hours or like in the summer?
So it all started off with the after school program.
So you worked with the school?
So we worked with the school.
Okay.
And so the first program partner was the school I mentioned, the homeless school. And then the second one that I added was a Boys and Girls Club, because that's after school program. And also when I was, going through my childhood, that was my safe place to go. There was a girls club within walking distance. So it just seemed like the perfect next program partner was Boys and Girls Club. Then I added summer camps for foster kids. So then I started creating all these different programs, but the signature program was the after school program. So you've got the camera, you've got the mentor, you've got the field trips. So we take them all over, whether, mix it up from urban to, nature, and just show them. But really the point of it is to show them that they have potential and that there is a world full of opportunity for them, because they don't believe either one.
Right.
So the other piece was the celebration of their work, to give them a sense of accomplishment, because these kids don't have sports teams or music lessons, and they don't have those opportunities. And so for the kids that went through the after school program, there would be a big public exhibit opening. And it is an amazing event. Last one was 600 people came.
Wow.
And so the kids, they each would have 2 images in the exhibit. And we also would produce a book. So people will come. So the kids imagine the kids standing there. They've got their 2 pictures on the wall. And then we have a writer that would work with the kids and write bios and captions. And they're standing with their pictures. And then the public can come and buy the book. So it was a free event. And both the kids and the public loved it. The public loves to interact directly with these kids. So the public can buy a book, go to the kid and have them sign it. So the kids literally felt like movie stars on that night. So, and a lot of them have never had any positive feedback or had a sense of accomplishment. So sometimes we'd see the transformation in the kid during the field trips and all that. It was like a light switch going off in their eyes as they start lifting their eyes up off the ground and becoming aware and noticing again and looking people in the eyes again. Literally a light switch. You can just see it happen. So sometimes we would see the transformation then. Sometimes the transformation may not happen until the exhibit opening. And there were kids that would show up at the exhibit opening. I'm like, oh man, I don't think we got through to this one. But then within that 2 hours, they would completely change. There's one kid who had this painful scowl on his face when we'd take a group photo that was going in the book and up at the exhibit, and his individual portrait, same thing, up at the exhibit in the book. Just big scowl. Literally could not smile. But then at the exhibit opening that night, he's smiling. And all the mentors were like, oh my God, he's smiling. And that smile never went away. So maybe for him, it was he felt invisible. There was so much packed into the programs that whatever the kid needed, they were going to get. And I just did it instinctually.
And you were doing this all on your own. You just started. You
Yep.
knew it. You knew it. And I guess because of your childhood, you could empathize and you could connect on an emotional level and a frequency level of what these children were going through, and you seen a need. Do you think it was because you said you had the girls' club that you'd go to that was a safe place? Mm-hmm. Do you think that, did any of it have to do with the fact that it would have been something you would have liked to have done for you when you were young? Or was this just something that was like, wow, I wish this could have happened for me, so I'm going to do it for somebody else? Or did this come out of the blue? Or was it like spiritually, did it happen? Was it inspired spiritually? How did it come to you?
I think it might have been more inspired spiritually. Like I said, I've been doing stuff for the kids for 20 years before I came up with this. So, it wasn't unusual for me to come up with something, always looking for ways to help the kids. And like I said, it was accidental. I didn't know the impact it was going to have, but somehow instinctually, I just put it all together. And I think it just, was a spiritual thing coming from my own experience. Somehow I just knew what the kids needed and all the different things to pack into it. Like, for example, accountability and responsibility. That was built into it. So the kids had to sign a contract saying that they will keep their grades up, that they will take care of their cameras, that they will treat themselves and others with respect, and things like that. And then they would sign it. Their parents would have to sign it, and the kids would sign it. And the kids never had to sign a contract before. We didn't say that we're going to kick you out if you don't, fulfill all of this. But we didn't have to. For example, there was a little girl that got in trouble, had a run-in with the bus driver. And she's getting reprimanded by the school. And she's, reacting with, I'm sure, what she's learned at home. I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. So the school said, okay, you also don't have to be involved in this program. What? Immediately changed, went to the bus driver and apologized. There was another kid, oh my gosh, there's so many, literally troublemakers were turned into leaders. And I have video recording of this kid saying, because I asked the kids, what did you get out of this? And in their own words, they would say the most amazing things. And he said, I was a troublemaker before, but I didn't want to get kicked out. And so I changed my attitude and I changed my behavior. And I've become a leader. You
gave them a future.
Yeah.
You gave them a future that was bright instead of dull and single or double or two-dimensional. You gave them a three-dimensional future ahead. Well, that they could see something good in their life.
That they have potential.
How many of these children, not to give it an exact number, but the ones that have problems, how many of these problems stem from their home life? As far as like a pie chart, is it the vast majority?
Vast majority.
And is it because they don't see respect at home, or is there a lack of respect in the home, in the family structure, or there's no family structure whatsoever? What are some of the causes that you've seen? Not, I know you're not diagnosing as a psychologist, right, but from what you've seen with what I call boots on the ground is where you always get your great intel.
Right.
You can set up in an office and have all your theories you want, but it's the boots on the ground that's going to give you the best intel of what's going on. So when you come across these children, and I suppose you were aggressive enough to look and to see why these things are kind of happening, and you peer into their lives through them, or maybe just visually stopping by the house saying, hello, hey, you did a great job, whatever. What are you seeing that is helping to create children? What are you seeing on the ground that creates this situation?
Well, it's a combination of things, and it depends on the situation. But because, like I said, when you're going, if you're living through an abusive environment, you lose the belief that you have any kind of control, and that you have any kind of worth. You get robbed of those things. And so I think, one of the reasons this program was so successful was showing them that they do have potential, and also teaching them that they can express themselves in healthy ways, and that they can trust you. It really, you lose trust in yourself and in the world and in the people around you when the people that are supposed to be protecting you are not. It can be very, very confusing thing. And so you're starting out with lack of self-worth, and that you can't do anything without that. When you can, and I'll come back to that, but it's the only way you're ever going to be happy, truly happy, because life will come back and bite you in the butt without it. You can fake it for a while.
Try to cover it up. Some dirt. Put it in a box.
you can become an overachiever. You can become a people pleaser. You feel like you don't have any control in your life. And over and over and over again, life is teaching you that you have no control.
One thing I've noticed with young people who come from extremely troubled homes is coming out of the gate. Maybe later on down the road it helped them, right? But coming out of the gate, a lot of them make bad decisions. They didn't have that solid foundation to make proper decisions out of confidence. Having self-confidence, self-worth, going, no, we have to think about this in a different way. And they make a bad decision, which can put them behind.
Very self-destructive, yeah.
For another 10, 20 years. And even if they'd never get out of it, but it still sets them back. And that's why I think it's so important that a good family unit at home, and even if it is a single parent, if that's what it is, to have that family unit at home is crucial to the development of the children.
And sadly, it is not uncommon to not have that.
I think it's more common than uncommon anymore.
It's sadly, very, and it's getting the problem's getting worse.
Even in the homes that have money.
Yeah.
Because the parents may have money, but they just ignore the kids, and the kids go off on and it does. I'm not saying that they don't do some bad things. They get into drugs, they do bad things, because there's not that communication, that respect that you have inside that unit.
Well, and if a child doesn't feel that they have any kind of opportunity, that they have nothing to offer the world, and that the world out there, that's not for them. There's no opportunity for them. If they don't have those two things, belief in themselves and belief that there's opportunity for them in the world, then they will make a lot of really self-destructive decisions. Mm-hmm. Then they'll get into gangs. They'll get into drugs. The girls will be pregnant by 13 because that's what they've seen. That's all that they think they're capable of doing.
I've got a theory. I've talked to my daughter a lot about a lot of issues, human behavior issues. We get into really deep conversations, probably more most than father-daughter conversations, but really deep because, she has some of my genetic in it, so she's always looking at human condition and studying, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people that are this is my theory, and once again, I'm not a psychologist, but it's my theory of what I've seen. A lot of people who make these very self-destructive decisions, as far as even just down to overeating, super obese, overeat, not that they have a medical problem, just overeating, over drinking, smoking, all these things. To me, and I hope a psychologist, Jordan Peterson, would correct me on this, it's self-destructive behavior because the brain's telling you to kill yourself. And it's going to be a long, slow, miserable death. It's go ahead and do that because you're not worth living. It's not worth living. You provide nothing. And I remember one time sitting out in L.A., was going from a studio to another studio for a film, and you got stuck in traffic in L.A., and I'm turning the dial, and there was a talk show on it. It was a psychologist on there, and they said something that always stuck with me, and this was like 15 years ago, 16 years ago. He said the number one definition of clinical depression is that you cannot formulate a future. Those kids come out of the gate with no future. Which, even as an adult that goes into a depression that's had a good childhood, maybe a good first life, then some things happen, I don't think you can truly identify with a child that had no future in their home. And they see the world as nothing but a dark abyss.
Yeah, but
what you did by giving them that camera, and I wanted to ask you, did you teach them about the camera before you give it to them, like rule of thirds, anything, or did you let them have at it and experiment?
Well, it evolved each year. I would try to make it better and better.
But let's say the first year.
It's first year, a little bit. It was mostly taking them around and having the mentor work with the kids and photograph. But then I started adding more formal training, essentially. But it was always very, very basic.
Because you don't want to take away their artistic vision.
Well,
right? Or wrong?
Yeah, what I was trying to nurture was their artistic vision, and I didn't want them distracted by anything technical.
Okay.
Right? So,
makes sense.
So the lessons, each session with the kids is, 3 hours. And we'd start off with in a classroom setting, have a presentation, teach them some really basic photo skills. Start off with showing the images from the week before, and they get real excited when they see their images up on the screen. Then we'd hop on a bus, and then we'd head out somewhere and start photographing. And then we'd come back and do a little critiquing. But most of it happened, on the field trip. The lessons themselves were so basic. We never mentioned shutter speed, aperture, nothing. They were using point and shoot cameras on auto.
Okay.
Because it wasn't about that. So the lessons were about composition,
the mind's
thirds, different perspectives, high, low, just teaching them to see the world in a different way, to see things with new perspectives, and to see it creatively. So that's really what it was about. So super, super basic photography lessons. And you had asked a question earlier about the benefit of art. I think we all know to some degree the benefits of art therapy, and learning to express yourself. I believe that photography is like art therapy on steroids, because if you're creating art, yes, you're expressing yourself, but you're still stuck in this space. It's you and your paper. And when you've been through trauma, that's not you need to be able to get out of that space. And photography, you're learning to express yourself in healthy ways, but you're getting out there in the world. You're seeing the world. You're interacting with people. And so that's why I think it's so effective, is because you get all the benefits of art therapy, but so much more. Another piece I also didn't mention is that one of the other pieces built into the program is the continuum of care. So once they've been through that program, then we would stay connected for years.
I was going to ask you if any of them became photographers, commercial or professional photographers, after that I don't know how many children that you'd mentored or helped. Did any of them become photographers as a trade?
There's been a couple so far, but there's still, it's still a new enough organization that, it's hard to say yet. And that was never the point,
no,
obviously.
I know it wasn't the point, but I just wondered
so
if
it'd be really interesting.
I love this. I love this art. I want to take it to the degree.
Well, and those kids that would really showed a strong interest, as part of the ongoing program, we had a program where people would donate their DSLRs, then we would gift them a DSLR.
Nice.
So then they could take it to the next level. So the ongoing programs involved regular outings just to keep us in touch, so they could see their peers and the mentors again, and just constantly remind them, because it's really easy to slip back when you go home and back into that stressful environment, because I know. So staying in touch with them regularly is a really important part.
So you're starting to provide more and more of your time with the helping the children.
Yeah.
And so something at a certain point's got to give.
Yeah, and boy, did it.
And it can be your health.
Yeah.
If you're keeping both ends running, burning the candle at both ends, you can do it for a while, but eventually it's going to catch up to you, or you have to let one go.
Yeah, and I kept growing it, adding more programs, just growing it in general, reaching more kids, adding more programs. And
was this filling your emotional wallet? You have two wallets, creatives, and the average person that is completely left brain don't understand it. They're the accountants type people. They don't understand the creative side, the right brain.
Yeah.
And when you said you have both, I have both. They work in tandem, and that can be a battle sometimes. Business, art, creative. Yeah. But there's two wallets that the people who use both hemispheres of their brain, you have to have the financial wallet. You have to have the logical wallet. That pays your light bills, that pays for the water and food that you eat. But there's an emotional wallet. And if that emotional wallet's empty, it's almost worse for a creative type to have that empty than this empty.
Well, it makes me think of a quick little story. There was a photographer that left Phoenix to go to New York. And he was a successful guy. And I was in town, was going to the photo expo in New York. And so I met him for lunch, and we were having this conversation now. And he's was more experienced and older than me, farther along in his career at this point. And he said, to be a good photographer, you have to eat, sleep, and breathe photography. And I said to him, I couldn't disagree more, because then your work is two-dimensional. It's the living of the life. It's the passion that you're living your life with. That's what makes your photography rich. Mm-hmm. And he was just sitting there like he couldn't believe this young squirt's, disagreeing with him. But
that's
I really,
being honest.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, real people want honest people beside them, because it what helps to drive them to a better perspective. If everyone's telling you what you want to hear, you never grow.
Yeah. And I just knew what, from my own perspective, from my own life, it's because of all the giving back that I did, mm-hmm. that, I could bring all of that feeling and emotion into my photography, and all of the adventures that I had, and it all works together. So yeah, it brought me actually, filling my wallet, it always brought me so much joy and purpose. So it was just a beautiful thing, and which is why I've always prioritized that throughout my life. But as I grew it, I lost the balance that I had. And then also at the same time I was dealing with back issues, and I wasn't able to do all some of my hobbies, surfing and scuba diving and motorcycle riding and climbing. And so I kind of took all of that time and energy and invested it into the nonprofit. So you've
created a nonprofit at this point.
Yeah, I created the nonprofit right as I did the very first project, and I saw the impact.
Okay.
On these kids, and I thought, oh my gosh, I think after 20 years of doing this, I've finally found the way. That's when I created the 501c3.
Okay.
So I ended up working way too hard, and I've always pushed myself, and that's just my nature. That's all I know to do. But I took it so far to an extreme. So, I knew it was out of control. So I hired some help. But then thinking it would help my schedule, but it didn't, because now I need to train them. I need to manage them. Oh, and now I have to have a fundraiser event to cover the additional overhead. So I'm like, well, that didn't work. So it didn't help at all. I was still working as much, if not more, than ever. And then once I brought the help on, then we really started to grow.
So was your first fundraiser event successful as far as helping to fund your project?
Yeah, and it actually, I knew that I wanted something totally different. The few I had been through in my life, I thought were so boring. Formal, sit down at a table, really long presentation. I'm sitting there thinking, this is so boring. Why would anybody want to come to this? So the event that I created was, I'm like, I want the opposite. Rather than stuck at a table, I want it to be a roaming event. Rather than a long presentation, let's do a short presentation. And it's called a feast for the senses. So all these different foods, so restaurants, all these different stations from different restaurants, you could try the different food. And everywhere you looked was entertainment, different music and different performers. And so it very quickly became immediately very successful, and very quickly became very well known. Was named one of best of the best of all the fundraisers in town. So it got a really great reputation. So it was really successful for us. But I kept trying to not continue to work at that pace, but it didn't happen. So eventually, second time now in my life, that it started affecting my health. Except this time it was a lot worse. So it started out with I passed out. It was in 2017. And went to the hospital, and they kept me for 2 days because they were so concerned my blood pressure was so low. So then it was after that I had a cardiologist. Then I would see like every 6 months, and like every 3 months for the next couple of years, I would have these episodes where I would get so dizzy. But then I got smart, and I realized if I'm that dizzy, get down or I'm going to pass out. So So I'm thinking, oh, it's just only every 3 months. It's nothing. Well, the cardiologist, was like, no, something's up. Well, basically, I continued. My body was trying to get my attention, but I had so much pressure on me. I'm doing this incredibly demanding commercial photography business and this growing nonprofit, working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for very long periods of time, rarely ever a day off, and a lot of responsibility and deadlines and stress. So it caught up with me. So it was 2019 that my central nervous system started literally to shut down to the degree they thought I had ALS. Muscles all over my body spasming. What would happen every 3 months was happening every day, every other day. I was so dizzy. I had to constantly get down. I had to stop exercise. I could barely go up a flight of stairs. It would trigger, my getting dizzy. And at that point, I'm like, what is happening? So, long story short, a couple of neurologists, and I was told that something was attacking my entire central nervous system. And was told that it has to be a virus or something. Now, at this point, I've done a lot of adventure travel. I've been in muds and waters of third world countries, so not out of the realm of possibility that I might have caught something, but I knew it was the stress, because when I passed out the first time, it was the same exact time of year. It's always busy for my business and the busiest time for the organization. So I knew it was, and I asked him, I said, can stress cause this? I explained I had a traumatic childhood, and through my working with the kids, I learned that it can damage your central nervous system. I mean, when your central nervous system and your vagus nerve is constantly in that fight or flight, mm-hmm. It can damage it, and it can come back, later and cause issues. So I explained I had a traumatic childhood. I said I also in recent years have placed myself under incredible stress while I've been building this nonprofit on top of running another business, and with just endless work hours. And he thought for a couple of seconds. He's like, no, stress can do this. It cannot attack an entire central nervous system. Oh, yes, it can. Yes, it can. So, another long story short, I was able to reverse it all. I was actually, during that process, had a tilt table test and was diagnosed with dysautonomia, which is a sign of a much larger neurological issue. You don't just get that. It means your autonomic functions aren't functioning properly. Anyway, supposedly I'm a miracle that, once you're diagnosed with that, doesn't go away. One of my other neurologists said, because I had another autonomic test that eventually came back normal, and he said, do you have any idea how lucky you are? He's like, people don't just get over that. He said, I've been doing this for 40 years. You're one of maybe 2 people in 40 years I've ever seen reverse it. And all I did was, I read a lot and learned about the vagus nerve. And so breathing, meditation, I started taking, Tai Chi. And anyway, I was able to reverse it. But what I realized is that I am working myself to death. If I keep this up, you actually can physically work yourself to death. So I'm like, I have to choose. I cannot keep, doing my photography business and the nonprofit, but I will always follow my heart, and I will always take a risk. And if I do those 2 things, then everything works out. So without any hesitation, I knew my heart was with the nonprofit now. So all right, I'm going to give up my career. So I gave up my 30-year career, making nice money, to make nothing. But I just knew I might have the faith it's gonna be okay. So told my clients I'm not doing it anymore. Gave myself to fully to the nonprofit with the sole intent of getting balance back in my life. Well, it didn't happen, because right after I made that decision, COVID hit, shut down. And I really needed to hire more help, but I couldn't increase my overhead when I had no idea what our income potential was going to be, because our fundraiser is 30% of our income. Couldn't have that year. Grants, 55% of the income. And all these grants we were counting on were canceled or redirected. So I continued, ironically, to overwork. And then also, a lot of nonprofits went into hibernation during this time. And I'm like, hell no. These kids need us now more than ever. Take away their school and their social programs and stick them at home in these environments. COVID's the least of their worries. So went into overdrive to serve the kids. And we were City of Phoenix was one of our supporters and said that they were interviewing organizations and they were talking to me. They're like, Karen, you are one of the only, if not the only organization serving kids throughout this entire pandemic. Because I'm like, hell yeah, there's no way I'm just going to abandon the kids at this point. So the point is I continued to overwork. So I thought, well, this is really funny because now I'm not even making any money and I'm still overworking, having no idea how long this is going to last. So 2 more years of that. So now it's 2022, January of 20. So it was January of 2019. January of 2020, I gave up my career. 2 years of COVID. So January of 2022, I am so desperate for help.
COVID hit hard here February or March of 2020, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
So you'd just given up your career.
I had just given up my career.
And in a matter of weeks, boom.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So not only survived the pandemic, actually thrived. We grew in the number of kids we served, the depth at which we served them, our awareness level, and even our income. We grew. So I now have survived a pandemic, but I'm desperate. I'm seriously concerned for my health. 2 more years of intense overworking and stress after my health had already failed. So at this point, I'm desperate for help. So, and I had met with a consultant, a few months earlier and explained my situation. And she, says to grow the board. And I intentionally had kept it kind of small because I'd heard, beware of the board. Well, now I know why. So January of 2022, I grow the board for help. And I got the opposite. So I got a board member on that with real power issues to a diabolical degree and came in and starts causing problems. Drama in the board, problems in my staff. And it was a 3rd year of stress and overworking. And long story short, I decide, I'm seriously concerned. So now I've had 3 more years of incredible stress and overworking after my health had already failed. So I need to step away from running this organization.
Now at this time, you've raised a substantial amount of money. So it's not like there's $10,000 sitting there.
Oh no,
it's over $1 million? Around $1 million?
Well, there was the budget was $650,000 budget where there's a $400,000 cushion in the bank. So yeah, it was a $1 million organization with stellar programming and impact and branding and awareness. But I just knew I couldn't be the one to do it anymore.
When you start to get into those realms, I think I told you last night. A wise person once said, if you ever want to destroy an organization, throw $1 million at it. They'll eat each other. And so $1 million is usually the cue point for the parasites to start. You get up on their radar. Do you think that had anything to do with?
Well,
would the loss of it happen if you had no money? Because there's no really reason to take it over if there's no money. Like if you had $10,000 operating budget through the year, would this have happened?
Well, I think that the organization had grown to a point where it was sort of a favorite in the community because it was so special, so really special and such incredible impact. And then the bigger something grows and the more special it is, the more it's going to attract people that kind of want something from that.
So you start to hand select the board.
So one thing I want to mention is that
Okay.
it's a dangerous thing. I look back now and I realize I had intentionally, kept the board very tiny. And at the point that I started to grow the board, the organization had been around for a decade. So here's this strong, developed organization that ends up with an infant board. So I look back now and realize how dangerous that is. It's one thing if you have an infant board and it's new and no one knows what they're doing, if it's a smaller organization. But it was a somewhat mature organization with an infant board. That's a very scary situation. I look back now and I realize what an issue that was. But I was so busy creating the organization and pulling it all off. And I was making it up as I went because I run it like a business, which is partly why it was successful. Right. But through this, I didn't understand the impact a board would have.
Through this time period and after, do you find now that nonprofits that are successful are like a light bulb to a moth for corruption? Not 100%, but it tends to draw that element for money.
It's not for money, it's for power.
But money is, I've always heard money is power, power is control.
Yeah,
money
well,
is power,
so,
power is control.
I've a lot of people have said that, and I ran into this in the business world as I was getting the big jobs in town and my peers are, threatened, especially since I'm a female, so they had to, make up, I'm a trust fund baby, which is so opposite the truth. It's hilarious. And that, I slept around to get my clients, and another that's hilarious. So, and I remember having my feelings hurt at first, but then I realized, take it as a compliment, Karen. They're threatened, because you're getting the big job. So, so I knew that was going to happen in the for-profit world because there's money. I'm taking money out of their pockets, right? So but what I didn't understand is that, and I've had this conversation, but why would this happen? I've had this conversation with people that know both worlds really well. But I wasn't even making any money. I was sacrificing myself financially. I was doing all of this out of pure love for the kids. I wasn't taking anything from anyone. But it's because there's no money, because the board is all volunteer. It's because there's money that it is notorious, that nonprofits notoriously attract people that have power issues. And that's exactly what happened in this case. So anyway, after that, that first year after growing the board and I continued to overwork and I was overstressed, I decided I can't do this anymore.
At this point, is anything going wrong with the board or is it running pretty smoothly?
Well,
at that time, through your visuals, you always have a 20/20 lens, perfect lens looking backwards. But in that time frame, do you see anything going on? And is that why you're trying to start to say, "Hey, this is just too much"?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot going on, but there's so much more that I want to talk about. I just don't know how deep I want to get into that. Well, but it was not functioning well at all. They didn't know what their role was.
It's adding to your stress level. Is what I'm,
for sure. They didn't know what their role was. I was naive to it. I didn't know either. And their issues were developing about how much the control they would have. And there were a lot of issues. And anyway, I decided, I for my health, I cannot. Someone else who's not sacrificed everything in their life to do this needs to take the reins at this point. I will still be involved. It's my baby. I will, I'll be an advisor. I'll still volunteer. I will help raise funds. The whole thing was built on every business and personal relationship I have. So, and so the board knew when I first announced I'm stepping out, she can't disappear. So anyway, so I decided I'm going to step down from running it every day. And I thought that my stress would end there, but it didn't.
Would you have stepped down if the board was running like a well-oiled machine supporting you? Would you have still stepped down at that point?
It was that third year after the 2 years of COVID. It was that third year that, if that had not happened and I had actually gotten help rather than the opposite, I wouldn't have stepped down.
Okay.
But
so you would not have, it wasn't a fact of, hey, I'm stressed out from too much of helping children that I'm stepping down. I just got to take a break. It's another stress, the human drama stress level, maybe of not having the support that you needed from the board that caused you to step down. What I mean, for the people who don't know, you're stepping down not because you were overworked from doing the job that you were doing helping children. It's the stress level of not having the support on the back end that you were supposed to have. Is that correct?
Correct. And it caused, issues that caused me more stress and more work. And
in other words, if you'd had the board from the unicorn farm, it would all worked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I knew, I'm like, I got to save myself at this point. I've just now had a third year of incredible overworking and stress, and I seriously was concerned for my health again. So I just knew, I'm like, I cannot. I got to step down. So I thought everything would get better at that point. But everything got 100 times worse. So the board hires my replacement. They hire a new executive director, and I still don't even know how to possibly describe it. It became like a hostile takeover. The minute that she took the reins, refused to speak to me, refuses a transition.
Usually when something like that happens in a 501c3, there's articles, and inside those articles, a very important one is that you have to treat the founder with the utmost respect and interest of their ideas and thoughts, because after all, they're the founder. They're the ones who put the work in. They tilled the first soil. They planted the first crops. So it should be listened to because they've created this beautiful thing, a nonprofit. Was that in some sort of a transition statement or anything that was supposed to happen?
Well, another downside of having a relatively new board, they should have been, there should have been a transition plan, and there wasn't one. But when I don't know.
So you were handing over your baby, hoping that they'd just take it on as
well,
you took it on.
Well, it was very clear. I mean, I was very, when I wrote a letter to all the supporters, I said, I'm not going anywhere, because we knew how important it was. It literally was built on every relationship I have. So I promised everyone I wasn't going to disappear. And funders made me promise over and over again, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. I'm like, no. So I planned on, remaining involved, but the incoming executive director had wanted me, literally refused to speak to me, refused to have a transition. I didn't get to train her on anything. I didn't get to introduce her to all the donors and sponsors and, the key stakeholders. All the stuff that normally would happen during a transition, none of it happened. I literally didn't get to train her on some really important stuff. And I didn't get the support of the board. There was someone in a position of power that I'm not sure who was driving who, but I don't want to go into too many details, but I will say that it became like a hostile takeover, and I'm standing there, what is happening? And the rest of the board, when they finally, started realizing what was going on, no one was willing to do anything. Everybody sort of took the neutral position, which allowed these other people to take it over and basically, completely push me out. It was, I've got to say, it was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. And I've been through a lot. But because I should have left feeling appreciated, respected. No. The complete opposite. Lies were being told. It's seriously the stuff they write movies about. It was so bizarre and crazy. And
this has got to be having a devastating effect on your health.
Yeah, so here I am stepping down because I'm concerned about my health, and then thinking, the stress is going to stop. It literally, the stress, it was so painful. I cannot even begin to describe. It's my child. I've sacrificed everything in my life, including my physical and emotional health, my financial well-being. The new person came in making a nice salary, something I had never gotten in all the previous years. I barely made enough to well, I never made enough to even live on. And I sacrificed that so that the person coming in got a nice salary. So, and I matched that salary for a few months, of that year. But I mean, because she got that salary because I'm the one who sacrificed and barely paid myself for all those years. So to sacrifice everything in your life out of pure love for the kids. I got nothing when I left. It's not even mine when it's a nonprofit. It's not yours. So all I got to leave with was my reputation. And they were trying to take that from me because they had to cover themselves and what they were doing and start saying all these lies and stuff. So it was devastating. I mean, I was shattered. I felt like I was being attacked by the devil. It was constant stuff, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. No one would do anything to stop it. And I don't know how to describe it. It seriously was the hardest year of my life. It's like someone took my baby from me and was abusing it and torturing it and blaming me. I mean, I can't even begin to describe, what that felt like to me as a founder, having sacrificed so much to build this thing and to be treated that way. But the direction I will take it is, I ended up learning a lot, and I was so devastated. I mean, truly heartbroken and shattered. And I didn't know why this was happening. I didn't know why I was being treated that way. And, people would say, I had a therapist trying to help me through this, and she's like, Karen, this is happening for you, not to you. And I just couldn't even hear that at the time, because it's like, okay, well, I know that I knew I was working myself to death, and I needed to get balance back in my life. Okay, so first I give up my 30-year career. That's a pretty huge step to take. That's how committed I was to getting balance back in my life. And then that didn't work. So then I give up the organization altogether. So the two things I have spent my entire life building, I have now given up. I have walked away from. Those are two huge steps to take as a commitment to myself, for my health and well-being, to try to get balance back in my life. So why this? Why did this have to happen? Why all that pain and just so much more stress? So it was really hard for me to realize at the time, but I realize now how it was happening for me. And it's because I had to be in so much pain that I truly could not function, that I would be willing to stop the world, completely stop the world. And in doing so, and I knew I was triggered, and it resembled my childhood abuse in a lot of ways. Someone in a position to stop it and not doing anything about it. In a lot of ways, mirroring it, working really hard for something and having it taken away. And so, because I was in so much pain, I revisited my childhood abuse. So I really dove in and spent several months dissecting that and realized how that the abuse was a lot worse than I realized and had impacted me in ways that I had no idea. And so I finally understood why I pushed myself so hard. And I knew I did, but I didn't really understand why. Why do I do this to myself? I finally understood why, because I really finally understood the depth of my abuse and how it had impacted me. And it went so far beyond just survival mechanism. So how I first realized this was I did a session with psychedelic assisted therapy. And it came to me. I didn't go seeking it out, but a friend had essentially offered me that opportunity. So I thought, okay, I'll try it. Well, essentially, that's when it surfaced. I was like, oh my gosh, it was a lot worse than I ever realized. And I pictured it like this lead ball, almost the size of a bowling ball, and just lead and heavy. And I could literally see it. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I knew there was abuse, but I didn't understand the depth. And I'd been carrying that heavy ball with me for 50 years. And that had been controlling me in the background like malware in ways I was completely unaware. So then started this process. So now I'm mourning the loss of my child, the nonprofit, truly my child, and my childhood. And it's been quite the journey and not an easy one. So unpacking and really diving in to even my childhood abuse and dissecting myself into pieces and deciding, what do I want to keep? How has this impacted me? Okay, now that I realize the extent of it, how has it impacted me? And dissecting myself into pieces and what do I want to keep and what do I want to discard? And there was a point in time I went away for a month. I couldn't handle being around people. I had so much to process. And since I've lived in that town for so long, I have family, I've got friends, and feeling like, oh my God, everybody wants a piece of me. And I just couldn't deal. So I went away for a month and just meditated and prayed and journaled and read and walked on the beach. And fortunately, I had a friend offer me a place to stay, has a house, and offered me a place to stay for that month. It's been an amazing journey. It's been scary at times. And one of the things I learned was to lean into that pain. And when you go through that kind of stuff, when you're starting at such a young age, and it's what they call complex trauma. Complex trauma is when it's not just an event. It goes on for a long period of time, and it could be on multiple levels, as mine was. And it's a lot to unpack. So in so many layers. So I've really been diving in and exploring all that and learning to lean into it. My answer to deal with it was just be positive, Karen, and sort of deny it and push those dark, scary, painful feelings down. And somehow, for a lot of years, I was able to be very joyful and very inspired. But it was what happened with the organization that that sort of triggered me and just put me in a place where I couldn't even function. I was in so much pain for it to finally come up. And now I realize you can't ignore those things. So, I was told I have to lean into that pain. And boy, did I learn how to cry and finally, move that energy up and really understanding how it's affected me. And one of the ways it has affected me is that pushing myself to the degree of punishment. I mean, who works 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the amount of time that I did? I mean, that's just cruel and unusual punishment. And I always recognize, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of insane that I would be willing even to do this. What I also realize is that when you are willing to treat yourself that way and sacrifice yourself, then you're going to attract people who are going to do the same thing. And I didn't have healthy boundaries and I didn't know how to protect myself. And so I've learned so much. I've understand the punishment piece now. And it's part of this victim triangle. You've got the abuser, rescuer. Oh my gosh, I'm spacing the third one. I can't believe I'm spacing. Anyway, it's a loop. Like an enabler. Anyway, what I realized is that I thought I was a warrior. I am the anti-victim. But what I realize now is, holy cow, I have been stuck in that loop because I went so far the opposite extreme. I am saving the world. Because a lot of people who are abused become abusers. And I realize now I did become an abuser to myself. So busy trying to save the world that I literally was abusing myself, punishing myself, pushing myself so hard. And when you do that, when you are completely willing to sacrifice yourself like that, then you're going to attract the wrong people, parasites, literally. And really important lesson. And so, and I, I've kept an open heart this far. I'm not going to change that now. But learning to live with an open heart, but also know how to protect myself and have boundaries. My gosh, there's so much that I've learned. I could talk for 2 more hours about all the different things that I've learned. I learned that I didn't have true self-worth. I had self-confidence because I would work so hard, I would accomplish things. And so I had, started to build. I didn't have any when I was a kid. It took me a while, but I started to build self-confidence simply because, I pushed myself hard. I end up accomplishing a lot. So, but self-confidence is very different than self-worth. So I thought, well, if I work hard enough and if I accomplish enough and if people like me enough, oh my gosh, such a people pleaser. That's how I thought I would keep myself safe. Total people pleaser, feeling responsible for everyone and their feelings. And if I'm, if people like me enough and if I help enough people and if I work hard enough, well, then no one will hurt me. And looking outward for that worth. And especially when people are lying about you, oh my God, that devastates you. It's like, what? But what I finally learned is like, if people are going to believe that crap, then you can't worry about that. As long as you know, Karen, that's all that should matter. And that's what self-worth is. So it was so important to me that people liked me. I was such a ridiculous people pleaser. And so to be treated that way for doing nothing besides sacrificing my life to help these kids, it cured me. So now I realize that, what true self-worth is. It doesn't come from out there. And, being nice and accomplishing enough, and that's not going to keep me safe. That's got to come from in here. So, my gosh, there's so much that I could talk about that I've learned. But now I realize how it happened for me. Because I don't know that I would have been willing to stop the world and learn these really important lessons if I wasn't in that much pain that I couldn't function. So it's been a hard, really tough process, but I'm so grateful for the lessons. And I really believe that to be happy, you have to be grateful. And you have to be grateful for everything. Not just the good stuff. You have to be grateful for even the hardest stuff in your life. Grateful for all of it. And I learned to be grateful for what I went through as a kid because I was able to reach levels of really good things. Not despite what I went through, but in a lot, to some degree because of it. That I've always recognized I've lived a very passionate, purpose-driven, joyful, grateful, inspired, compassionate, empathic life. Because of what I went through, I was able to reach those depths of those things and able to help change the course of thousands of kids' lives. What a gift. So I was look at all these beautiful gifts that I got. So I could be grateful for what I went through as a kid. I really, this is going to be the toughest one of all. I really believe you have to create a purpose from the pain. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you're really, truly going to be grateful for all of it. So I'm really grateful for all the lessons that I learned through all of that. And I will find a big purpose so that I will look back on it and be grateful that I went through it, figuring out still exactly what that's going to look like. But I can tell you, I am more purpose-driven than ever because I'm not going to waste all that pain that I went through.
So you almost went full circle all the way back around to find the pain in yourself and to try to heal yourself, to prepare yourself for what in the movies you call the third act, which is the final act.
I'm actually
the final act of the movie.
Yeah, I refer to it as my chapter 3. My chapter 1 was my photography career. Chapter 2 was the nonprofit. And so I've got chapter 3 that I'm working on.
And you're the writer I always tell people, you're the writer of your own script. Unless it's strange circumstances, you find yourself in prison or whatever, something like that, but you're the writer of your own script. You're the writer of your own movie. And so why not make it a beautiful movie?
Absolutely.
And with a beautiful movie, unfortunately, comes pain. When you watch a beautiful film, it's the conflict inside that film that helps to drive the protagonist to a better life. It's the conflict.
Yeah.
And you've experienced enough deep conflict to have a beautiful third act.
Yeah.
In your writing of your script.
I can feel it in my cells. I know there is my third chapter is going to be awesome, and very purpose driven. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I can just feel it in every cell.
It's coming.
It's yeah. And I've learned so much, and now I get to apply all of that, to this next chapter.
In this process, you also went through a marriage.
I did.
And it didn't end well.
No.
And how much of that do you think was because of the trauma that you experienced, that you're pulling in, basically attracting not what you need?
Well, yeah, no, it is so common for people who have been through abuse to make a very poor choice in a mate. When you go through trauma, it robs you of that self-worth. And you don't understand what that even means, and you don't understand your own value, and you don't have healthy boundaries. You don't even know what it feels like to be, to have those healthy boundaries. And when you're surrounded by unhealthy boundaries, it's impossible for you to know, what that looks like, what a healthy boundary looks like. So it's so common to end up making a very poor choice in a mate. And I certainly did. It was not a good choice for me, not a good person. And boy, did I learn through that. I functioned on guilt and, oh my gosh, learned a lot there. But absolutely, myself included, it most often causes you to make a poor choice in a mate.
I always, and people have heard me say this ad nauseum, but I can't drive it home hard enough. The most important thing you can do in your life is choose a mate. Mm-hmm. If you choose the wrong one, you can be the most successful person in life, financially or however, and your life is going to be miserable. You choose the right one, you may not be so successful financially. You're going to have a great life because you're going to have that appreciation, that humility, appreciation for small things. Hey, just going out and having a bread and butter sandwich. If you're with someone you love, well, that's a great time.
Yeah.
You can go out and have the best filet mignon in the world. With the wrong person, it's awful. Life's awful.
Yeah. So
living in a mansion with a bad person is awful.
Yeah.
Living in a small shack with the right person is wonderful.
Yeah.
Now it can get better if you're with the right person and live in the mansion, but still, if you don't connect with that, it will destroy your life.
Fortunately, I had the strength to leave. One of the best things I ever did. Sometimes people, they don't. And I'm just really glad that I did. One thing I want to make sure that I mention, because I didn't talk about it very much, and for anyone listening that might be considering trying a psychedelic assisted therapy, I want to say that you have to be so committed to doing the work. And when it surfaced, I was like, oh my God. So if something like that surfaces, especially if you already know you've been through complex trauma, you've got to be really so committed to totally dealing with whatever comes up. I mean, I didn't know what was going to come up. I was shocked. But it doesn't end there. That's just the beginning. I mean, months and months and months and months and months of work
What
process it all. So I would not say, don't even consider it if you are not fully committed to doing all the work that comes afterwards.
What do you mean by the work? Can you give me a detail or a bullet point on the work? What do you mean by work with afterwards, the post?
So the willingness to really face really scary feelings.
So to lean into it.
Leaning into it. I've actually learned to become a good meditator, and I've been in meditations where so much came up with visuals, and I would have thought I was on the psychedelics, but I wasn't. And being willing to do that, like being willing to go away for a month, removing yourself from everyone and everything in your life just to be alone and to focus on that, and being willing to read endless books and to really dive in and embrace that pain. And, when you've lived through really scary stuff like that and you're willing to stare it in the eyeballs, it can be a very empowering thing. But you don't want to open that all up and then go, oh yeah, okay, no. You have to be willing to face it and deal with it and really question everything about yourself. And, talk to counselors, do the journaling, you do all the reading, whatever it is for you. For me, it was all of those things. But that was the only way I was able to turn it into something good. I can only imagine that if someone that has lived through complex trauma were to have the depth of that surface and then to deny it at that point
Would be worse.
I'm just guessing.
Because you've unboxed it.
Yeah, then you've unboxed it, and it's up at the surface. So what do you do with that? You cannot be willing to ignore it. You cannot be willing to go back to your old ways. It took me, oh my gosh, so many layers just trying to figure out this whole punishment piece. And I knew it was a thing, but oh my gosh, with months separating it, little by little, did I finally gain the understanding of what it really was about. And so you have to be really willing to acknowledge and accept those things and explore them. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody do it. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear for anyone listening. You got to be willing to do the work after. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Then it's a lot of work afterwards.
So you think that it uncovers the mental scar tissue? It's like you have scar tissue when you're with athletes or hard work. You have a lot of scar tissue, literal scar tissue. The mental scar tissue that's laying there from trauma is going to surface in these treatments sessions. And I know one thing in life for sure is you can never run from your monsters. You have to stop and face them. And the sooner you face them, the smaller they are. The longer you ignore them, the bigger they get.
Yeah.
And the harder they are to deal with.
And I thought, I've done a ton of work over my lifetime, and I thought I had dealt with it all. I had no idea what was down there. But it was survival. I was so young when it started, and it just got buried so deep. So I thought I had conquered it. I truly didn't know. And then I start really exploring it and realizing, oh my God, here I thought I was the anti-victim. I'm a warrior. I was victimizing myself the whole damn time. So, and being willing to accept and really look at your life and realize, okay, the ways that it has affected you and how you've been a victim and how do you fix that? And, it's a hard process because you question everything. Literally everything about yourself. When I came back from that month away, it was like I had myself dissected into 1,000 pieces all over the table. And I remember coming back and this anxiety, because then everybody wants to see me. Everybody wants a little piece of me. And I've been so willing to completely sacrifice myself and being such a ridiculous, extreme people pleaser that I didn't know I didn't have that healthy boundary, and realizing the anxiety and having to learn, God, well, how do I do this? How do I go from spending my entire life being a ridiculous people pleaser and sacrificing myself to not doing that? And and being willing to literally dissect and, and okay, well, like even the accomplishment piece, I've accomplished a lot of things in my lifetime, but also realizing at what cost and how I've pushed myself. Well, so does that mean you just question everything. Does that mean I'm not going to accomplish anything anymore? You don't even know who you are at that point because you've literally dissected and you've questioned everything in your life and sort of putting yourself back together. It's like, no, you know what? I can still accomplish great things and I can still make a big difference. But now I know I can also have healthy boundaries, not be such a people pleaser, and take care of myself. But there was a period of time where I questioned, like, how do I even move forward? I don't know, because I don't even know who I am now. So it's a crazy process, but you have to be willing to go through it.
So you're basically the classic tale, the classic story of the abused becomes an abuser. Mm-hmm. So you were an abuser, and the abuse you chose to delve out was not to anybody else, it was to yourself.
Yep. I was so busy being there for everyone and saving the world, all the while abusing myself, completely sacrificing myself. And, another very common thing is, besides not having healthy boundaries, not knowing how to protect yourself, not having that self-worth, you don't trust yourself. When your reality continually is getting denied, you don't even know how to trust yourself. I would trust everyone else's opinions before I would trust my own. Not speaking up and speaking your truth. And so really realizing how much all of those things have affected me, but from the outside, I had it all together and I've accomplished everything. No one would believe. Wait, Karen doesn't have self-worth? I mean, people recognize I pushed myself ridiculously hard, but it's so funny that from the outside, you'd think
from the outside you look like an authentic overachiever workaholic.
Yeah.
On the inside, you're dealing with something else that even you didn't understand on the subconscious level.
Yeah.
That's the subconscious is a very powerful tool. It's working when you're sleeping. It's working when you're awake. It's a computer that's constantly going, feeding thoughts through the channels, and you don't know where it's coming from, but it's there.
Yeah.
And it's constantly deciphering problems that you need to solve, even if you're unaware of it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it can cause massive trauma, going back to where you experience physically. When the doctor said that, oh no, stress can't cause that, to me, and the way I believe, once again, I'm not a medical professional, although I play one on TV. But I'm not a medical professional. But to me, stress is they say, heart disease, cancer is the biggest killers in the United States. It's stress. Stress causes the cancer. Stress causes the heart disease. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases. And when you combine the amount of stress-related secondary cause or secondary disease, which is the heart disease, the cancer, I've personally witnessed people go under so much stress that it happens. My mother, her mother lived to be 101. Her grandmother lived to be 99. It's longevity's in, and it was in her. You could see it. Mm-hmm. Went through something extremely stressful. Ended up with cancer ridden through their body in the 70s. No one in her family dies in the 70s. It's all close to triple digits, right? Mm-hmm. And you could see it. Stress took me out. I had a heart attack. Mm-hmm. Was dead, resuscitated. It was stress-driven.
Stress kills, yep.
And the doctor's like, well, your cholesterol's low. It's stress. Mm-hmm. It is the number one killer. And these people who prey on people, who are good people, they have a special place in hell. No, they really do. Because they enjoy watching people suffer. They're sadists. And they get they energy vampires, whatever you want to call them, they get their energy from it. It keeps them going. It's kind of like the classic tale of Dracula, who goes in and sucks, has to have the blood of the virgin especially. That's to me what it signified was the blood of the pure heart, the energy of the pure. The people who are out doing, I'm going to sacrifice myself. I'm giving up my career. I'm going to help children. Well, what if you have to eat peanut butter and jelly the rest of your life? So be it. I'm helping children. Then there's the evil bastard. Oh, there's some prey. I'm going to go to it. And they enjoy it. Now, I know that's a spiritual level thing, but that is honestly how I see some people.
But I also realize that now I am so much
stronger,
wiser, better able to protect myself, not willing to sacrifice myself. I can recognize, I can speak up, I can stand up for myself. And I honestly, I really truly believe I would not have gotten here. I mean, I knew I needed to get balance back in my life. I was very well aware, which is why I gave up the two things I spent my life building. But
it's preparation for your third act.
It truly took me being in that much pain for me to really fully understand the impact my abuse had had in my life. And so I'm like, well, I'll just be, as I said, if I'm just nice enough and if everybody likes me and I'm a good enough person and I help enough people, then no one will want to hurt me. And then so I am putting out this energy, okay, don't betray me, don't hurt me. Well, then what am I going to attract? I'm going to attract people that are going to betray and hurt me. Because that's got to come from in here. No one's going to betray me and no one's going to hurt me. And now I finally get it. And I'm not going to attract that anymore.
But I think your story might help people to see this in their own situations, in some situations, and heal. I think we said last night, you learn some hard lessons. Hey, God, I'm not that dumb. You don't have to. The lessons doesn't have to be that hard, right?
Really,
does it really have to be this hard? I don't need a ton of bricks. Just one brick dropped on my head, not a ton, right? But
apparently, but
obviously,
I'm really stubborn.
So you needed it, right?
I'm very determined.
There you go.
I prefer to use the word determined, and I am.
But
what I realize is I developed such an incredibly strong will. Mm-hmm. That was how I survived.
The will to survive.
Yeah, I have such a ridiculously strong will, but no, a strong will can never replace a lack of self-worth. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was trying to do.
That's the foundation of a house. That's the concrete in the ground, is that self-worth, confidence. I don't mean arrogance, humility. Always, humility is very important in life, but confidence. And that's the confidence to know that you have self-worth. Mm-hmm. And there's boundaries. That self-worth is the boundary. And you see what you said, you see so many people who've been through bad homes. They don't have the self-worth, so therefore they begin to demoralize themselves. Demoralization is a start of destroying yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's the brain killing itself. Go ahead. I'm fine with that.
The brain is a really powerful thing.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you know that your heart fires off actually more electrical impulses in your brain. When they always talk about the brain being the only brain, and people say, well, yeah, but you feel it in your heart. Mm-hmm. Your heart is actually almost like a brain. And they're doing more and more research now, which I'd love to. If anyone wants to do a documentary and send it in the film festival, you're probably going to get an extra credit. We don't give extra credits, but I might, especially if you throw a German Shepherd in there. But anyway, there is syndromes that are broken hearts. Another big thing in society that is completely ignored is loneliness. A lot of people experience loneliness. That's traumatic. They have no one to talk to, no one to connect with. They might be surrounded by a ton of people, but they're lonely in a crowd because it's all fake. Mm-hmm. The job you have, the place you live, the country club you belong to. Hey, lose your job, lose your house in the country club. Are those still your friends? Then they never were.
Right.
They never were your friends. If they're still not beside you, they never were your friends. So it's fake, and the subconscious knows that. And when you're living that lifestyle, keeping up with the Joneses and all that, boy, is that an empty road. And it's true loneliness. So you can be surrounded by a whole group of people and be extremely lonely. Yeah,
and you don't have to go through, complex trauma to experience these things. Everybody, I think, at some point in their life, everybody has their challenges and they can't be compared or measured. And I think at some point in everybody's life, they're faced with those questions. Whatever's not working in their life is going to come staring them, right back in the face. So I think it's part of our purpose, being here on this earth, is to learn those things.
And I think sharing your story, because there's other people out there going, it's the importance of movies, especially what used to be the movies have become such an agenda piece anymore. It's political agenda. Movies used to tell, just like a novel, it helped us to explore ourselves, the situations we're in, and how to deal with them. Great movies, classic movies, are much tales like that. You can identify with the character on the screen, mm-hmm. You identify with the story, and the way the movie is written out and how the third act ends, it gives you hope. Anymore, the movie industry is 95% political agenda. They're driving home agendas. It's not the human condition anymore. And I crave those stories. And by having the film festival, we get in a lot of stories from around the world. And this year, I think you showed up to the Freedom of Speech Symposium. And we have a lot of people being affected. In fact, a well-known director, Sean McNamara, came with the film Bow Artist at War, which was a heavy film, a very good film. He is the director of the new film Reagan, about Ronald Reagan with Dennis Quaid. Mm-hmm. And when he was here, I was going to text him earlier. I'll text him tonight or tomorrow, and I'm going to say, do you see why we had the Freedom of Speech Symposium? Because a lot of filmmakers, we got freedom. Facebook banned that movie from having an advertising push behind it. So, where we put your money behind it to push it out to where it shows up on your page. Right. Just as they did with us with the Freedom of Speech Symposium. As soon as we put a couple names up there who was coming, we couldn't advertise it any longer. Same thing. Reagan. Is that seriously something that would cause discourse to the event or to the degree that you have to shut it down? It was a president of the United States.
It's just
a story.
Historical story.
Yes. And so they're trying to drive agenda so much. And it was one of the reasons that I started the film festival. Because a lot of the big film festivals are agenda-based. And it's in the application. What agenda do you, what a political agenda, basically it's what political agenda do you push for? I don't believe in that. You make the best film that you can make, and it entertains or it educates. I don't care who's in it. I don't care what it's about. Is it done well? That's all we care about. Right. You're not going to get extra credit for agenda. You're going to get extra credit for where extra credit through meritocracy. Did you do a good job? Is the film entertaining? Does it make you laugh at the right moment? Does it make you cry at the right moment? If it is a documentary, does it inform and educate people? We've learned so much just by getting these documentaries. And what's really interesting is the films from around the world. You get a different perspective, a different lens through the camera, through different perspectives from around the world, because people in America think America is like the entire world because they haven't traveled outside the borders. Well, maybe they went over to Canada. Well, that's a lot like America, Travel 9, 10,000, 12,000 miles away. You get a completely different perspective of life. And I think that's how you grow, is by looking at another perspective, going, there's another way to look at this. Healing the human condition. And that's why it disturbs me. It makes me angry to know that hundreds of billions of dollars is being pushed into agenda films to push narratives that are political, when it's such a powerful medium and there's so many people that are hurting that they could help with stories. Yep. And that's what you did. You took this on. You did something that probably seems almost impossible to do as an individual. You helped, like you said, thousands of souls. How many of people's lives did you save? You'll never know. We ran a free film school for 2 years. And one of the people in it, Heather was doing a little documentary piece on it and asked the person, what if you could tell anybody about this program? It was free for anybody. Okay? If you could tell anybody about this program, what would you tell them? And she said, it saves lives. Then she turned to give her the suicide note that she had written a week before she found the Film Institute, which I just happened to be on. I put it up on Facebook. And they started to come what you did, you have no idea probably how many lives you saved by opening up their mind, opening it up to art. And art really is if you put them into a PET scan, CAT scan, MRI, you can see the brain activity flowing for art. The United States is one of the least funded societies in the industrialized world for art. Up until 15 years ago, Germany's number 2 expenditure, before they went down the drain, their number 2 expenditure was art. Number 2. And their society and culture showed it. They no longer do it. Now look at it. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are a corporate-driven, gray, the people at the top business levels, they can't see any need for art whatsoever. And I always stop them in their tracks and I'll say, Paris. Maybe not Paris of today. Paris of 10 years ago and back. A city driven by art, a city driven by culture, a city driven by beauty. You go over there and if you're into architecture whatsoever, your mouth drops. There's nothing like that in the United States. Go into the palace. Go into the opera. It's unbelievable. What does that do for the person going in there? If they are depressed, if they're living in that black world and they see something like that and know that they can possibly be a part in creating something like that in their lives and others. I think that's what you did. I think you opened their eyes up.
Well, yeah, how I like to describe it, I think that's absolutely a hugely important piece. But the bigger picture for me was always building resilience and providing the life skills needed to make that shift from surviving to thriving. And you can't do it without resilience. And, you know, the self-expression and that art that's a piece, but all the other things too, the building trust, the building, you know, the self-worth and the confidence and all of those things. They're all pieces, very important pieces to build resilience, because you can't, the only way to save these kids is to teach them how to save themselves. Here's an example. At this same homeless school, a friend of mine worked with Circle K, and Circle K was a client of mine. Essentially, the school mascot was the wolf pack. So, to teach the kids a lot of great lessons, there was a store called the Wolf Mart created. And Circle K provided all of the items for the store, and the glass case, and we turned a closet into a store. The kids would earn wolf bucks through good behavior. So they're learning to, you know, and normally the only recognition they get is from bad behavior. Very, very common. So good behavior, they earn their wolf bucks and they learn to save. And then they would take shifts and they would work in the Wolf Mart. So this kid, he is given a backpack, which you don't value what you don't earn. He's given the backpack and he destroys it in a few days. Well, now he's got to earn his next backpack. So through good behavior, he earns his wolf bucks and he saves them up. And then he gets his next backpack. Guess what? He valued that backpack. He took care of it. And that's the only way to save these kids. You can give them all you want. That's not doing anything for them. The only way to save them is to teach them resilience and responsibility and accountability and self-worth and all of those and life skills. That is how you save a kid.
Structure. Having a structure.
Structure and just the resilience to overcome challenges, because their life is going to be full of a whole lot more challenges going forward. And the only way they're going to get past it is by having that resilience. So yeah, it's about art and art and self-expression, and that's a piece, but it's a piece to the whole resilience pie, and that's what it takes. That's why I built so many different things into the program. because I knew that's the only way to save these kids. They have to save themselves. They have to be able to overcome the challenges and not repeat the cycle. It's, oh my gosh, it's so cycle driven.
In going back to what happened with the nonprofit, if there was any word of advice that you could give to someone in that first 2 to 5 year period of growth, what advice would you give them? Like blanket advice. It doesn't mean it's going to adhere to every situation, but just a blanket statement. Like you talk to people at end of life and they'll say, hey, think of it this way. And what's that? Hey, think of it this way, or look out for this, or don't do this, or do this. What is the piece of advice you can give someone after this has happened?
Well, one, I would say it's very common for founders to burn out because no one has any idea what it takes to create something from scratch and build it. And founders are so passionate about what they've created and the cause that it's not an uncommon. My story is not that uncommon. The extreme nature of it might be, but it's very common for founders to burn out. I would say first, be careful, because once you reach that point, there isn't any going back. You don't destroy your health. Don't burn yourself out. And also be very, very careful who you get on the board. I was naive to the power. I mean, seriously, boards can fire a founder. Boards have all the control.
That happens when you go public too, not with nonprofits, but with public companies, not for-profit.
Another story that is
I witnessed
not uncommon.
Carmike.
Yeah.
Carl and Mike Patrick. Carmike, they were removed.
Yeah, there's so many.
Or no, one of them was
so
removed.
Many stories. Just be aware, be very careful who you give that power to. I would say those two things.
And power over your life, like in a mate or a partner or whatever.
Yeah.
Be careful who you allow in, but I think that also at the same token, you have to have the ability to open your heart to someone, because the only way to truly experience true love, true whatever, is to expose yourself 100%, but you better be damn careful who you expose it to. But at the same token, so it's a double-edged sword of life.
Yeah.
It's like the proverbial carrot dangling out in front of you. Hey, to experience this great thing, you got to expose yourself. And then on the other side, the good and bad, the devil and the angel character, but I'm going to get you when you do it. So it's that tempting. I had a conversation with a monk one time. They said the secret to life is to not have expectations. I said, that's awful. What joy are you going to receive without having expectations? You're a flat character. And we had a discussion about it. I said, you have to have expectations. It's called hope in the future. And because we delved down, he said, all your pains are from your expectations. Well, that is true. But imagine not having any expectations, how dull that would be.
I think the important thing here is how you define what an expectation is. I think he's referring to an expectation of the outcome. And that's always going to disappoint you. You can't have expectations on the outcome. So I think you're using expectation in a very different way, in a very different way.
We brought up a job.
Than he is.
You're expected to get paid at the end of the job. If you do a job, you do a photography job. Are you not expected to be paid with a check that won't bounce?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well,
I'm not expecting that. No.
Okay, so that's an expectation. You wouldn't be as vibrant about doing it if it wasn't there, the paycheck. So you need to have that expectation in your life in order to have that drive to get better and better. And if people continue to disappoint you and that paycheck continues to bounce, you give up. To me, that's not the right way. The right way is to have the expectation and do all you can to try to make that outcome work, realizing that sometimes it's not going to be. And when it isn't, that's the lesson. You were taken to school. The universe took you to school and said, hey, this is why I did that to you. Pull back here, push forward there, whatever. It's them levers. But to me, I honestly believe you have to have a vision of the future that you would like to see and push after that. That's personal thing. So we disagreed, but we came to, we also.
It's all how you sort of finesse it.
It's all how you finesse it. And I also got him to actually, if you want to check out the interview, you can check it out on my channel. I think I broke through one thing to him when he was saying about all peace, 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 peace. I said, you can't have peace with everyone. People will take you over. And I said, Chinese, what'd they do to you? Where's Tibet now? You have to resist. Well, he said, I kind of see your point there. I said, yeah, you can't have all peace with your enemies. You have to have a line. So, and maybe that's the man's perspective, but it is a perspective that gives us nations, gives us families, all these things that we have to protect. We want to be kind, but we have to protect.
Yeah, you have to have boundaries in every.
Yep.
Just like the borders to this country, you have to have healthy boundaries.
Yes, we have no boundaries now. It's not doing. We're not doing so great. So I think boundaries are extremely important, and in our personal lives, as a nation, as a state, as businesses, as companies, as nonprofits, there has to be boundaries. And I think it all stems from one thing: respect. Mm-hmm. If you're with another person that respects you, you never really have to worry about your boundaries being pushed. It's with the people who don't have respect for you. They'll keep pushing and pushing and pushing because you can really feel when you make someone uncomfortable. And if you keep pushing, well, you're kind of an a-hole, right? Mm-hmm. Back off. Don't make someone uncomfortable. If everybody has respect for everybody else, we have 99% of our problems disappear in life. That's my true respect.
Yeah, and to truly respect yourself.
Yes.
Because if you don't truly respect yourself, you are not going to be able to place healthy boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate you coming here and sharing your story. I think there's going to be a lot of people who benefit from it.
That's my hope. That's why I'm sharing the story.
And if they're coming along and they're starting to do these great things, keep having that big open heart, but be a little guarded. Watch who you involve. And if you can't, hire someone who can. I always thought a good business would be when there's a death in the family, and people who there's an inheritance at stake. You've gone through something so traumatic. You've just lost someone. That's when the parasites come in. You're weak. You're in a bad position, and things can go awry quick. I always thought it'd be a good business, and I don't know what the structure would be of it. I'm sure there'd be some sort of oversight from the government, whatever there'd have to be, but someone you'd hire to come in on your behalf and act as a business consultant inside of a death to have your back, because you're not in an emotional state to deal with. Most people are not in an emotional state to deal with it. If you've had a husband for 40 years or your child passes away, you're not in the best state of mind at that point, and you can be taken advantage of. I always thought there was a business model there for people to come in and say, hey, I've got your back for X amount of dollars. I've got your back, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's same with life. You should always have that John Wayne character somewhere in your background that's going to step forward when things get hairy and say, I've got this. And there's people who are designed and built for that.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that a lot of creative people have big open hearts, and they can expose themselves very easily. And so I always hate it that the people who destroy those people, because they're the people who bring beauty to life. They're the ones that make beautiful things. They should be protected.
I agree.
So,
but just know I will continue to go create beautiful things.
Well, it's because you got a warrior spirit.
I'll just know how to protect myself this time.
You got a warrior spirit. You got two things going on at you once. You got the warrior spirit and you got the creative.
Yeah.
So I know you'll create beautiful things and do a lot of good things for people. I know that because you've already done it.
Thank you.
So good luck on the journey.
Thank you. I'll keep you posted.
Yes.